We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu, perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words. I submit that these impressions are valid and significant, and I will even say this: such an impression is a clue that at some past time point a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this an alternative world branched off.
Good morning and welcome to the Mashup portion of this week's programming. This is the Monday Mashup. My name is Robert Phoenix, and I am here to stir things up a bit. To the best of my ability, and bring you some interesting news and hopefully some peculiar insights, strange attraction, high strangeness, synchronistic thoughts, whatever that may be. I am a channel, theoretically, for the next 60 minutes for that to occur. Now, if there's any meaning you might discern or interpret or allow into your life from this as being personal, have at it. Because sometimes, I get emails from people telling me that a lot of what I do is very synchronistic, meaning that there's something that I'm talking about that hits them, right? And so over the course of 60 minutes, I touch on a number of things. So there's probably a chance that I'm going to hit something somewhere for somebody. So I guess the more I talk, the more opportunity I have to create some meaning in one's life. So does that sound about right or perfect? I think it does. All right. It was Mother's Day yesterday, and I know that there are mothers that listen to my show, and I hope you had a good day. I hope that, when I was a kid growing up, I hated Mother's Day. Let me take that back. You get indoctrinated into these days as children. Like my kid right now made a gift for his mom, made a little fancy little box with some little, refrigerator magnet thing that he gave to her. He made a card for her, made a card for my mother. So, you get that as a kid, right? I think around 20, 21, 22, which I still think is a kid, by the way, I began to detest Mother's Day. I began to detest Father's Day. I began to detest all these days that just became these commercially exploitative moments, right? And so I wouldn't celebrate it. I wouldn't get into it. And my mother would be upset. She's like, well, you don't like Mother's Day. You don't love me. It's like, no, it's not that I don't love you. I don't like the fact that I'm supposed to jump through this hoop on this day in order to do something nice for you. But as I've gotten older, it's like, this is what happens when you get older. You go, okay, whatever. I'll get into it. I have my philosophical disagreement with it, but it's not going to change how she feels. She's not going to wake up one day and say, Robert, and stroke her chin, you're right. Although that's not true. I have to say that. She did say that to me last night. she did say that to me last night. She said, "Oh, these days just get so, it's funny how this just started off as kind of a minor celebration, and now it's gotten blown out of proportion, and everybody has to do all these things and go out to dinner." She said that to me. When, your father and I, when he was alive, towards the end, we just let go of these things like this and Christmas. I'm like, really? Wow. So, but if I hadn't gone out and gotten her some flowers and bought a card and all that stuff, she would have felt a little slighted, trust me, even though she was commenting on the mundane aspect of this social ritual. So, what does it mean? Well, I think of the Sufi maxim, which is tether your camel first, and then trust in God. So I tethered my camel. I got her some flowers, and I got her a card. And it was fine. It was absolutely fine. So anyway, to all you mothers out there, I hope you had a good day, and I hope that the people in your life generally notice and recognize and love you for who you are and what you do, because parenting is a huge sacrifice, both on the paternal and on the maternal side. It's a big, big sacrifice. Speaking of sacrifice, I really got into Marvin Gaye this last weekend, and I watched 2 documentaries on Marvin Gaye's life. Pretty much watched them back to back. And one of the documentaries liberally used information and footage from the other documentary, the first one that I watched, but it wasn't solely just lifting the entirety of that documentary. So I learned a lot about Marvin Gaye. I learned a lot more about Marvin Gaye. Was always, to me, a very intriguing and enigmatic is the word that would be used to describe Marvin Gaye. He was born in 1939, just a year after the birth of my mother, so Marvin Gaye would be in his 70s today if he were still alive. And his career is really broken down into almost 4 distinct phases. He started off in a doo-wop group that was fronted by the guy by the name of Harvey Fuqua. So he did doo-wop vocal music, and he toured. He toured in that doo-wop group, and he was raised in a very fundamentalist household. His father was a very strict, I believe it was Methodist. He was a fundamentalist. He was a fundamentalist preacher. So his dad was a minister. He had his own church. So Marvin Gaye was raised in the church. And he was a very sensitive kid, Marvin Gaye was. And his father beat the hell out of him. The fear of God, fire and brimstone, and all that bullshit. And his father, the type of church that his father preached in was this really kind of bizarre, hardcore version of the ecstatic Black American dispensationalist experience. Testifying and shouting out, and that version of the church. And they had merged it with this kind of hardcore Jewish orthodoxy, Old Testament stuff. So you got the agony and the ecstasy, right? The wrath of Yahweh and the release of tension through the ecstatic celebration of the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, through dance and song. So Marvin Gaye grew up singing in the church, obviously. But it was a very weird blend. And his father was like Yahweh, who smoked Marvin at every turn. And he left, and, Marvin Gaye became successful. He went to Detroit, and he signed up with Berry Gordy and Motown Records. And so now we have phase 2 of Marvin Gaye's career, which is the phase where he was in a duet with Tammy Terrell. And, of course, their great hit was Ain't No Mountain High Enough, beautiful song. And Marvin Gaye Marvin Gaye had one of the great voices of the 20th century. You know, people lament the loss of Whitney Houston. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Whitney Houston, just a little bit. I don't want to digress too much. But Marvin Gaye, in terms of male singers, this guy was it. If you listen to Marvin Gaye's version of the Star Spangled Banner, which you can find on YouTube, maybe I'll play it before the show is over. It usually goes down as perhaps top 3. He sang it at an all-star game, NBA all-star game. There are 3 versions of the Star Spangled Banner that are famous for their evocative and stirring qualities. One is Marvin Gaye. The other is Whitney Houston, the aforementioned Whitney Houston, at the Super Bowl between New York Giants and the Buffalo Bills. And the third is Jose Feliciano's version of the national anthem, which I believe took place at a baseball all-star game. So those are 3 stirring, evocative, and profound kind of versions of Marvin Gaye, responsible for one of them. So he has this phase. Now Berry Gordy becomes Marvin Gaye's surrogate father, because Berry Gordy was slightly older than Marvin Gaye. Not a lot, but you know, I think maybe about 7 to 8 years older than Marvin Gaye. And he furthers his career along, and Marvin makes a lot of money. And then the tragedy of Tammy Terrell dying was what really hit Marvin Gaye in a very profound way. And that, coupled with, you know, what was happening during the very turbulent period of the 60s, with the Vietnam War and poverty being really exposed in the inner cities, and the first kind of wave of police brutality, organized police brutality in response to protests. That all took place right at this time when Tammy Terrell had died and Marvin Gaye was heartbroken. He was married at that time to Anna Gordy, who was Barry's sister. And again, just like Barry, she was older than Marvin Gaye was. And the person that was, and I'm getting to a point here, the person that was really influential in Marvin Gaye's life was his mother. And his mother was the force that protected him from his father. And what happened with Marvin Gaye was that there was a demonic and an angelic duality that was set upon him by the separation, the emotional and spiritual separation between his mother and his father in the home. You know, it was so distilled. It was like his father was God. His father was the wrath of God. And very little compassion in his father. And then his mother was pure and angelic and loving and accepting. She was Marvin Gaye's go-to. So immediately when he went to Motown Records, what does he do? He forms a relationship with surrogate father Berry Gordy and surrogate mother Anna Gordy, Berry Gordy's sister, who becomes his wife, which was not a satisfying relationship for Marvin. All he wanted was acceptance from his mother and his father, and here he was trying to get them from these two people. So the 60s happen, Tammy Terrell dies, and Marvin Gaye creates one of the greatest records of all time in what's going on. And when he created that record, that was something very, very different from anything Motown had ever had as part of its catalog. Motown at that point in time was mostly love songs, songs of unrequited love, songs of celebrating love, coming together, splitting apart. That's what Motown was. Smokey Robinson, Temptations, Supremes, Little Stevie Wonder. There wasn't anything remotely heavy, or profound about Motown at the time. And when Marvin Gaye came out with What's Going On, it was mind-blowing. For people at Motown, they didn't understand it. I mean, they laughed. They sat around the board. They played the record, and Marvin Gaye was part of that meeting, and they laughed at the record. They didn't know what to do with it. It was alien to their ears. But it wound up making Berry Gordy a fuck of a lot of money. And Marvin Gaye fought with Berry Gordy constantly about his musical direction. And sometimes they actually physically fought, which is what he wanted to do with his dad. After What's Going On hit stratospheric heights, he took a suitcase with $1 million in it, and he went back to his father's house, and he put the suitcase on a bed, and he opened up the suitcase, and he showed his father the money. His father, of course, being a man of God, said, well, so what? He quoted some piece of scripture in the Bible. And that moment, I think, probably really devastated Marvin Gaye. It was kind of like that moment in Giant with James Dean and throwing the dollar bills at his dad in Giant, right? So now Marvin Gaye is restless. He was eternally restless. And what does he want to do? He wants to get out of his contract. He wants to free himself from Berry Gordy, from the image of his father, from Motown. He wants pure, unadulterated psychic freedom. So he goes to Los Angeles, and Berry Gordy did something that was unconventional and had never been done before at that time. He allowed Marvin Gaye to record another record or a record for another label. He gave him permission, and Marvin Gaye did the soundtrack to the movie Trouble Man. And it was a very successful soundtrack, by the way. And while he's in Los Angeles, he met a 17-year-old girl that he fell in love with. Now, mind you, he's still married to Anna Gordy at this time. And while he's in LA, this is where his real trouble begins. This is where the demons descend upon Marvin Gaye. Because it's Los Angeles, and that's what happens to people in Los Angeles. That's what happens to people in the music business and the entertainment business in LA. And Marvin Gaye went off on a big-time binge of drugs and alcohol and one-night stands, and it was, a pretty empty pursuit. It's when he got into that. It was his crooner phase too. It's when he got into these love songs that were very, very sexual in orientation. So Marvin Gaye really descended into his root chakra and his second chakra down in Los Angeles. But it became too much for him, and he had to leave. He had to leave, and he tried to save his life by going to Hawaii and living out of a bread truck. He literally slept in a bread truck, cruising around Oahu. And by this time, his life is he'd done 2 records. He did a record that he had to do based on the courts. It was a record that was based on his alimony or his settlement with Anna Gordy. And that's what he had to do, one record, and all the money from that record would go to Anna Gordy. And the record he created was My Dear, This One's For You. And it was an album that was just based on nothing but his contempt and hatred for the process of divorce. It is clearly a divorce record. And it's probably the most uncommercial record he ever made. He did that on purpose. So eventually, he winds up in Belgium, in a little place called Oosten, where he's hanging out with this guy named Freddy Kruisert. And Freddy Kruisert is an interesting character. He was a boxer, and he trained boxers, and he became friends with Marvin Gaye and decided to resurrect his career. Fascinating kind of saga in Marvin Gaye's life. Now, mind you, Marvin Gaye had never given up drugs at any point along the way. He was a major drug user, and he was possessed. He was possessed by demons. That's pretty clear. But he did manage to create one last album on Freddy Kruisert's dime, and that one was called Midnight Love, and the hit from that, the big hit, was Sexual Healing. And then once Marvin started making money again, he came back to the States. He moved in with his parents because he wanted to connect with his mother, and it was a bad move. He was still doing heavy amounts of drugs, walking around his house with a revolver that was loaded. He was paranoid, and one day his father killed him. His father had had enough. Apparently he'd beaten up his father at least once. Now, there are rumors that his father killed him out of mercy because the quote-unquote Illuminati were after him, and that they were demanding that he make music and play the game. So his father, there are rumors that his father offed him as part of a mercy killing, that what lay ahead for Marvin Gaye was even worse than what his father did to him. His father got off incredibly light, by the way. His father got 5 months probation after spending, I think, 5 months in jail. That's it. Or 5 years probation after spending 5 months in jail. Fascinating saga, immense talent, tortured beyond belief. And one of the things that came out of the film was there was a young drummer that played with him while he was in Oosten. He said, there will only be one Marvin Gaye. It's true. It's absolutely true. There have been really good singers before him and after him, but for a good 10 years, he was I think, the greatest male vocalist on the planet, both from a lyrical perspective, but also from an ability to climb inside a song and just make it his own in such a unique way. I mean, Marvin Gaye had the ability to understand the nuance of a note, or to let it hang, or to slow the song down. The guy is amazing. Absolutely amazing. And so there's only one you. There's only one you. There's only, one Erica or one Gemini Sun or one Mustang Sally. There's only one you. And it speaks to the uniqueness of who you are. And one of the things that came out of this 2-hour relationship I had with Marvin Gaye over the weekend was that Marvin Gaye was very into this whole idea and concept that, that if somebody has a gift, that you need to nurture that gift. Whatever that gift is, and we all have them, no matter who you are, you got a gift. So my question to you would be, what is your gift? And how are you nurturing it? How are you being the mother to your own gift? To the child of curiosity and creativity, novelty and expression. How are you doing that in your life? Are you doing it? And if you're not, why not? And I know that there are economic constraints and all that stuff. We all have them, trust me. But it's something to think about. And it's maybe a gift that Marvin Gaye just gave to me this weekend that I'm passing on to you to be able to share that. This morning when I woke up, I heard a strange kind of rattle and just a strange noise. And it was not ending. And today is the day when the garbage guys come. So I thought it might have been the garbage guys. But the garbage guys came and went, and the noise was still happening. So I got up, and I remembered that I had set a rat trap, because there's all kinds of wildlife here where I live, including rats, which, by the way, are wild animals. Even though you can put them in a cage and feed them, they are wild animals. And I have a restaurant just catty corner behind me, and so there is vermin hanging out around this area. So I'd had some rat and mice problems before, and okay, so let me deal with it. So I got my rat trap up. It's been up for maybe a good 2 weeks, and nothing. I'm thinking, oh great, I've solved it. I've solved my rodent problem. And then this morning when I heard that thing rattling around, I think I got a rat. And it was really weird. I came up, I knew it was there, and I faced a moral dilemma about what I should do with this rat. And because it wasn't dead. It was not dead. And I am a rat. I was born in the year of the rat, so I have a little bit of a soft spot in my heart for rats. When I kill a rat, it's not something I really want to do. So here's the rat. It was probably a teenage rat. I saw that rat, and he's running around trying to free itself from, this trap. And I have to say it. I killed the rat. I did not pick the rat up and take it outside and drive, a mile away and chop the tail off and turn it loose. I did not do that. I'm sorry. I wish I could have been a better person. But in that moment, it was me or that rat. That's what it came down to. And so I took that rat out. And it was kind of empowering, It was kind of empowering in its own way. Didn't really want to do it, but I did it. Because I let mice go before. Guess what? Those little freaking mice came back. They came back. They knew where I lived. So I've been told about that. If you let a mouse go, you've got to let him go like a couple miles away. Frankly, I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to establish my dominance over that rat. Maybe it was just a measure of control. So today was kind of a funny day that way. The other thing that happened is I went out and I got my early morning coffee, and I'm walking back to my house, and there's this guy on his bicycle, and he's on the street, and he says to me, "Hey, look, there's a turkey up on that apartment building." And sure enough, 2 stories up on this apartment building, there's a turkey, a wild turkey hanging out there. Looking quite majestic, by the way, for a turkey on an apartment building. And just as I was about to take that turkey's picture, it flew. It flew all the way across the street, which is a pretty good flight. So turkeys are, they're not bound by the same laws of gravity we think they are. They can actually, turkeys can move. Trust me, I saw that this morning. So anyway, from rats to turkeys, that was my contact with the natural world today. So I'm going to talk a little more about the natural world, and I'm going to devote the next 30 minutes of the show, for the most part, to your health. My health, your health. Health is really important. It's vital. We've got a series of nuclear reactors that are spewing shit into the atmosphere. I don't know if you've been following what's happening with the Alaska Airlines crews, but they're showing up with their hair falling out. They've got scabs. They're itching. And Alaska Airlines is blaming it on the uniforms. Well, the patch that is the most active with Fukushima radiation, unfortunately, is between Seattle and Alaska. Seattle is being just absolutely bombarded with radiation, and the flight members and the flight team and the crew, they're all suffering from the result of Fukushima radiation. That's just the way it goes. That's what's happening. It's not these stupid fucking uniforms with this solvent. You can change the uniforms. And yes, it's a lousy solvent. They're made in China. It's a solvent we don't use in this country. But apparently, the FDA doesn't give a shit about that. So let's talk about your health. It's important. I'm going to read to you a couple of pieces from greenmedinfo.com. And the first piece I'm going to read to you is about probiotics, which I have really gotten into. And the unfortunate part is that if you live on the West Coast and you're eating West Coast yogurt, with probiotics in it, or West Coast kefir, and guess what? You're dealing with probably radioactive milk. So I discovered this coconut kefir from a company called So Coconut. It's not bad. In fact, I just had a sip. Anyway, probiotics, they're essential. And most of us are running around with our guts that have been decimated of flora. Oh, by the way, I just learned about the true meaning of the word decimate. Does anybody know what that is? Decimate stems from a time in, I believe it was the Roman army. If the men, decimate Roman, decimate, it's Greek army, it's Greek. Greek army, where if the men did not fight, or if they lost the battle, or if they didn't fight strong enough, or valiantly enough, especially if they lost, the commander of the army would line up all the men, and he would count, and every 10th man would be pulled out and killed in front of everybody else. So instead of wiping out lots of people, it was very selective, and he got the point across. You kept your own fatalities down low, but you made your point. Hence the name decimate. So here we go. Let's talk about probiotics. It is an awesome fact of nature that we have trillions of organisms within our body containing completely foreign DNA, some of which break down toxic chemicals that we humans have created to kill other things but are now killing us, e.g. pesticides. What are these strange helpers? Bacteria. Wait, aren't bacteria supposed to harm us? Aren't they the enemy in an endless war against infection? Well, when our immunity fails, some can grow out of bounds opportunistically, but they respond to the environment in which they are raised, not unlike most creatures. Provide organic, wholesome vegetables, for instance, and you have a hotbed of positive activity in your gut. Provide sugar, excuse me, processed foods, and an increasing burden of chemicals, and it can get ugly in there. Also, believe it or not, ancient bacteria teamed up with our cellular ancestors eons ago to produce the energy-producing organelles within our cells called mitochondria. So, are we really that different from bacteria? No. On some level, we are bacteria, spurning some researchers to describe us as meta-organisms. Mitochondria. Isn't mitochondria the fear of Mitt Romney? I think it brings a whole new meaning to the word mitochondria. So let's look at some of the amazing feats of these friendly bacteria. Bisphenol A toxicity, absorption, excretion. Bisphenol A, BPA, is an increasingly omnipresent petrochemical derivative with endocrine disrupting properties. It messes up your hormones. So bisphenol A absorption, so there are people that claim that bisphenol A absorption is changing our sexual preferences, that theoretically it is converting male DNA into being female DNA, which is leading to the rise in people choosing homosexuality. Look it up, it's out there. So here we go. Let's get back to this. And it's found in thermal printer paper receipts, all world paper currency. Think about that. Anytime you touch money, you're getting some bisphenol A. Plastics and many other consumer goods. Sadly, it's not a matter of whether or not you will be exposed, but to what degree. Enter the probiotics. Bifidobacterium breve and Lactobacillus casei, that's the names of them. In rats exposed to BPA in their diet, blood concentrations of BPA dropped significantly as it was excreted in their feces, 2.4 times more readily than non-supplemental control group. The researchers concluded that probiotics reduce the intestinal absorption by facilitating the excretion of BPA, and that these probiotics may suppress the adverse effects of BPA on human health. So if you want to stay heterosexual, just take probiotics, okay? I'm sort of kidding. Bisphenol A toxicity degradation. Novel bisphenol A degrading bacterial strains were isolated from the traditional Korean fermented cabbage dish known as kimchi. 3 isolates of Bacillus pumilus were shown capable of degrading BPA. The researchers reported that these food-derived bacteria would make efficient and safer systems for removal of BPA. Logically, the consumption of kimchi or probiotics extracted from kimchi would enable the human's gastrointestinal tract to break down this harmful chemical as well. I love kimchi. I love it. I went to Whole Foods yesterday. I looked at a jar of kimchi, organic kimchi. It was $10. $10, okay? $10. How many servings do you get out of that? It wasn't a huge jar. Insecticide toxicity. Here comes kimchi to the rescue again. In 2009, the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry revealed that the rather nasty insecticide chlorpyrifos CP, which has been linked to neurological effects, developmental disorders, and autoimmune disorders, may be no match for the bacteria that makes kimchi fermentation possible. The researchers found that bacteria in kimchi turned CP into lunch, a source of carbon and phosphorus, and degraded it rapidly. Until day 3, 83.3% is gone, degraded it completely by day 9. The superheroes in this story were identified as Lactobacillus brevis, Lactobacillus plantarum, and Lactobacillus sakei. But then things got even more amazing. These toxin-munching superheroes were found to degrade 4 other insecticides: coumaphos, diazinon, parathion, and methylparathion. If you think the chemical munching degrading abilities of probiotics are amazing, then consider that probiotics perform thousands of vital functions within our body and have been clinically researched to prevent and or reduce symptoms of close to 200 different diseases. You can view the first-hand research on the benefits of probiotics on greenmedinfo.com's research page. So here's the addendum. It says here, when it comes to good bacteria, it is important to point out that humans do not live within a vacuum. The quality of the bacteria in our gut reflects the quality of the food we eat, which ultimately depends on the quality of the soil. If you grow your vegetables in raw human sewage from unhealthy folks, or factory-farmed animal waste already preloaded with antibiotic-resistant bacteria and chemicals, there is little hope that you will receive sufficient beneficial bacteria from that food. What is more likely is that you will be exposed to highly pathogenic antibiotic-resistant bacteria, which have already survived decades worth of chemical and antibiotic exposure, within the human gastrointestinal tract, or loads of zoological antibiotics used on the concentrated animal feeding operation, almost guaranteeing your own microflora will be continually challenged with unhealthy disease-promoting strains of bacteria. This is one of the most disturbing and unspoken aspects of conventionally produced food, but there are others: gamma irradiation, bacteriophage sprays, etc. Moreover, new research indicates that our own increasingly GMO-based global food production system, which depends so heavily on the broad-spectrum biocides like the active ingredient in Roundup weed killer, namely glyphosate, is destroying the fertility of the soil. Essentially, the culturally ancient food starter bacteria as used in fermented foods like cheese and yogurt are disappearing in certain regions of the world. See, those things live in the soil themselves. And by continually hammering the soil with these insecticides and these pesticides, we're killing the things that keep us alive. The soils have become saturated with herbicides that are destroying the microbial biodiversity, which many of the foods that we consume would not be possible. With that lifeline to health, which comes from the soils cut off, our own health is compromised, perhaps irreversibly. What does that mean? Planetary health and human health are no longer separable. Truth is, they never were. We need to move beyond the concept that we can hermetically seal ourselves off from the ecological destruction and mass poisoning occurring around us by only consuming organic. If things continue at the pace they are going, the word organic will have no meaning whatsoever other than marketing spin. The case of percolate accumulation in organic food makes this problem blatantly clear. In other words, unless we become activists on this issue, we will lose everything. I believe one good place to start is to support campaigns such as the California Right to Know campaign, which will place Right to Know Genetically Engineered Food Act on the ballot November 6th. Okay, great. There we go. The author is Sayer G, S-A-Y-E-R, and G is his last name. And he's been featured on Mercola.com in the Journal of Gluten Sensitivity, which leads me to my next piece. My next piece that I'm going to read here is, can wheat drive you more crazy than your digestive system? That's the headline. And it's written by the same guy, Sayer G. Let me just read this here quickly, and I'll put the links into the chat room. Wheat could be driving you more crazy than your digestive system. While wheat is well known to wreak havoc on the gastrointestinal health of genetically susceptible folks, such as those with celiac and more recently IBS, new research published in the Journal of Psychiatric Research indicates that sensitivity to one of the components in wheat, known as gliadin, could be driving some into states of acute mania. The relationship of the antibodies to the clinical course of mania was analyzed by the use of regression models. Individuals with mania had significantly increased levels of I, lowercase g, capital G antibodies to gliadin, but not other markers of celiac disease at baseline compared with controls in multivariate analysis. Among the individuals with mania, elevated levels at follow-up were significantly associated with rehospitalization in the 6-month follow-up period. While correlation does not equal causation, it is interesting to note that there is already robust supportive research on the link between wheat consumption and schizophrenia. 7 such studies can be viewed on our open source wheat database for those inclined to explore this connection further. You will also find listed that there are over a dozen neurological conditions linked to wheat consumption. For an additional explanation of why wheat may exhibit neurotoxic, if not also psychotropic properties, the excerpts from our essay series, The Dark Side of Wheat, are provided to shed light on this topic. Here's a very brief section from it. Gliadin can be broken down into various amino acid lengths or peptides. Gliadorphin is a 7 amino acid long peptide. Tyre-pro, gin-pro, glin-pro, pro-phe, which forms when the gastrointestinal system is compromised. When digestive enzymes are insufficient to break gliadorphin down into 2-3 amino acid lengths, and a compromised intestinal wall allows for the leakage of the entire 7 amino acid long fragment into the blood, gliadorphin can pass through to the brain through circumventricular organs and activate opioid receptors, resulting in disrupted brain function. So what we have here is we have a complex 7 amino acid long peptide. You see, that's too big. That's too long. It can't be broken down. When it's into a 2 or 3 amino acid length, it will, it's okay. You can deal with it, but it's just too long. So then it goes rogue, and then it gets into your blood, right? And then it links up and literally hitches a ride to your brain. There have been a number of gluten exorphins identified, gluten exorphin A4, A5, B4, B5, and C, and many of them have been hypothesized to play a role, and check this out, autism, schizophrenia, ADHD, and related neurological conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, wheat has been driving us insane for thousands of years. If you want to be free, start by breaking your weed addiction. Trust me on this. In the same way that the celiac iceberg illustrated the illusion that intolerance to wheat is rare, it is possible, even probable, that wheat exerts pharmacological influences on everyone. What distinguishes the schizophrenic or autistic individual from the functional wheat consumer is the degree to which they are affected. Below the tip of the gluten iceberg, we might find these opiate-like peptides to be responsible for bread's general popularity as comfort food, and our use of phrases like, I love bread, or this bread is to die for. It is indicative of wheat's narcotic properties. I believe a strong argument can be made that the agricultural revolution that occurred approximately 10 to 12,000 years ago as we shifted from the Paleolithic into the Neolithic era was precipitated as much by environmental necessities and human ingenuity as it was by the addictive qualities of psychoactive peptides in the grains themselves. So when the Romans started throwing out bread, right? Bread and circuses, when they started to throw bread to the masses, maybe the Roman emperors were onto something. Maybe the Roman emperors knew that by throwing people bread, that they could keep people in a state of somnambulance, of waking somnambulance, that the bread itself could keep people in a trance, that it could repress certain qualities. Perhaps they knew this, which is why the bread circuses were so popular. Give them bread. Let them eat cake. Right? You know, it's interesting. I did some research on bread, and the only slaves that could be given freedom in ancient Rome were the bread makers. So if you wanted to be free in Rome, you became a baker. And you would literally, slave away in these ovens. And the ovens were big. You used to walk into the ovens. So they were very hot. That's how they baked everything. They were large ovens. And that's where the bread got made. But that was the price to pay if you wanted to be free. The World Historical Reorganization Society, Culture and Consciousness, accomplished through the symbiotic relationship with cereal grasses, may have had much to do with our ability to master agriculture as to be mastered by it. Aha! Who is farming who? Talk about that. The presence of pharmacologically active peptides would have further sweetened the deal, making it hard to distance ourselves from what became a global fascination with wheat. An interesting example of wheat's addictive potential pertains to the Roman army. There we go. Trust me, I did not read this before I was talking about Rome. The Roman army empire was once known as the Wheat Empire, with soldiers being paid in wheat rations. Rome's entire war machine, its vast expansion, was predicated on the availability of wheat. Forts were actually granaries, holding up to a year's worth of grain in order to endure sieges from their enemies. Historians describe soldiers' punishment, including being deprived of wheat rations and being given barley instead. The Roman Empire went on to facilitate the global dissemination of wheat cultivation, which fostered a form of imperialism with biological as well as cultural roots. The Roman appreciation for wheat, like our own, may have had less to do with its nutritional value as health food than its ability to generate a unique narcotic reaction. It may fulfill our hunger while generating a repetitive, ceaseless cycle of craving more of the same, and by doing so, enabling the surreptitious control of human behavior. Other researchers have come to similar conclusions, according to the biologists Greg Wadley and Angus Martin. Cereals have important qualities that differentiate them from most other drugs. They are a food source as well as a drug and can be stored and transported easily. They are ingested in frequent small doses, not occasionally large ones, and do not impede work performance in most people. A desire for the drug, and even cravings or withdrawal, can be confused with hunger. These features make cereals the ideal facilitator of civilization, and they also contributed to the long delay in recognizing their pharmacological properties. Wheat peptides exhibit molecular mimicry. Gliadorphin and gluten exorphins exhibit a form of molecular mimicry that affects the nervous system, but other wheat proteins affect different organ systems. The digestion of gliadin produces a peptide that is a 33 amino acid long peptide and is known as a 33-mer, which has a remarkable homology. 33, isn't that an interesting number? To the internal sequence of, it says it has a remarkable homology to the internal sequence of pertactin, the immunodominant sequence in the Bordetella pertussis bacteria, whooping cough. Pertactin is considered a highly immunogenic virulence factor and is used in vaccines to amplify the adaptive immune response. It is possible the immune system may confuse this 33-mer with a pathogen, resulting in either both a cell-mediated and adaptive immune response against self. So essentially, what the author is saying here is that this 33 amino acid long chain can activate a pathogenic response to the body. Fascinating stuff. Absolutely fascinating. Okay, so I'm gonna go in here and I'm gonna put these links in the chat room so you guys can check this out. Here's some stuff on. I'm putting the link in there now. You guys can check that out. There's one link, and here's the other link right here to the last story I read on the probiotics. There we go. There we go. And done. So if you're in the chat room, you can check this out and grab some of these links. I think they're really, really important for everybody and their diet. So for me personally, I'll tell you what happened. I got to a point about, I think it was around July of last year, maybe even a little bit before then, and I was beginning to realize that I could not, I thought I was allergic to food, because every time I would eat something, I would get sick. I wouldn't be able to hold it down, I wouldn't be able to digest it, you name it, I had problems with it. It was getting really depressing. So I decided to take wheat away. I had done this before in my life. I'd been wheat-free for a while before. And it was interesting because once I started making money in the dot-com world, guess what I did? I started eating wheat again. I started like having sourdough bread. I love sourdough bread. Not anymore, though. So I stopped eating wheat. And a couple of things happened that were mind-blowing within just a matter of weeks. Number one, I slept better. Number two, I could digest food. Number three, I had more energy. Number four, my mood was far better, far better. And number five, I had suffered from TMJ most of my life. And when I opened my mouth, I'd have this major crack and pop in my jaw. And I'd been to chiropractors, I'd been to craniosacral therapists, all over the place. And nothing helped. Nothing helped. And after it must have been about 2 or 3 months after I stopped eating wheat, I opened my mouth and it's like, hey, where'd that pop go? I don't have that pop anymore. That's amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, it's all about wheat. I dropped wheat and my jaw came back. The tension and the soreness I used to have in my jaw was excruciating. And it's gone now. It's gone. If you haven't gotten off of wheat, I highly, highly recommend it. There are some blood types and some people with particular DNA that can handle wheat. I can't. I'm a caveman, okay? I have caveman blood. I have caveman DNA. It's the way it is. I'm learning to love it. I wish it was more complex. I wish it was more sophisticated. I wish it was more the RH blood. I don't have it. So that's just the way it goes. Learning to love my caveman blood. But dropping wheat, I highly recommend it. And I did something. I had wheat. I had one big thing of wheat over the weekend. And you know what? It affected me. It totally affected me. And I normally don't have it. And I went to this event on Sunday with my son. It was at the Oakland Coliseum. And it was a workshop with the Oakland A's. It was like a seminar. You know, kids got to play ball with the coaches on the field. It was a great thing. It was a great day. And I was really hungry. And they were serving food afterwards. And the only thing they had was hot dogs. And I eat hot dogs. I try to get really good hot dogs. I try to get organic beef. Trust me on this. I don't mess around with hot dogs if I don't understand the meat source. Okay. But I was so hungry. I've been out there for all day. I was like, I'll eat this hot dog. And I ate the bun. I got to tell you, I didn't feel good. It had an immediate impact on me. It brought my energy down. I got dizzy. So it was a good way for me to check in with gluten. And I got to tell you, I was depressed. You know, gluten fed into my depression. And now that I'm gluten-free and alcohol-free, well, there you go, clean living. Kind of boring though sometimes. I got to say, baseball was a lot more fun when I drank. Especially when I'm watching the 3-1 game and not a great, it's a pitching matchup. But it wasn't, there wasn't a lot of action going on. Drinking would have made it a lot more exciting. All right, well, thank you for hanging in there and listening to my little piece on Marvin Gaye and gluten and what else? Probiotics. Look, if we're going to stay here, we may as well take care of our bodies, right? And staying here on this planet is going to be a conscious choice now. It's just the way it is. If you want to stay, you got to be here. You got to be your body, mind, and spirit. Okay, I'll be back on Wednesday, and we're going to get into this annular eclipse coming up this weekend. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be heavy. You've got NATO meeting in Chicago. You've got, we've got the G8 meeting at Camp David. It's a big one. And the peak of the eclipse is taking place in Alaska. The eclipse starts in Asia and literally moves across the Ring of Fire. It's going to be a massive eclipse. And, this is one where we really have to pay attention. It is not happening in some obscure part of Antarctica or any place like that. This is going to make a physical impact on our environment. So let's get into it on Wednesday. And I'll do some free readings on Wednesday as well. So, the score. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open to what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix, and you've been playing in the Monday Mashup. I'll see you on Wednesday.
We are living in a computer-programmed reality, and the only clue we have to it is when some variable is changed and some alteration in our reality occurs. We would have the overwhelming impression that we were reliving the present, déjà vu. perhaps in precisely the same way, hearing the same words, saying the same words, I submit that these impressions are valid and significant. And I will even say this, such an impression is a clue that at some past time point, a variable was changed, reprogrammed as it were, and that because of this, an alternative world branched off.